By now you know the deal. We're previewing this week's slate of college football games, and we're talking about the top 2022 NFL prospects in each competition. We're going to start off with the Red River Rivalry game between Oklahoma and Texas. Texas obviously has been struggling as a program lately. Oklahoma is still highly ranked, but somewhat underperformed this year. I think some people will agree with me that they're overrated in terms of their national ranking right now. But Oklahoma and Texas face off at 12 p.m., so basically noon on ABC Eastern Time. And let's just start by looking at Oklahoma. Because Oklahoma right now is the far superior team in terms of future NFL talent for the 2022 NFL Draft. At least Texas obviously has been recruiting quite well in recent years. They're going to have plenty of players make it to the NFL eventually, especially Bijan Robinson. He's amazing. But Oklahoma right now is the most talented upperclassman in this game. And of course, it all starts and ends with Redshirt sophomore quarterback Spencer Rattler for Oklahoma, who's underperformed this year. He still played well. He still has a chance to be the top quarterback taken in the 2022 NFL Draft. That says a little bit more about the quarterback class than Spencer Rattler's overall talent, but Rattler is definitely a good player, an impact player for Oklahoma, even if he's not living up to the same level as Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray. Even Jalen Hurts was better than Spencer Rattler's been this year, but still an impact player and still someone who will be a highly rated 2022 NFL Draft prospect should he decide to actually go into the draft. Two running backs for Oklahoma, both juniors, Kennedy Brooks, and then Tennessee transfer Eric Gray. These are two guys who are not going to be standout running backs. This running back draft class is not very good, to be honest. I don't think there's even a first-round pick in this class. There might not even be a top 50 pick at running back in this year's draft. But these guys are both going to be mid-round players. They don't have a ton of tread necessarily this year. They haven't gotten a ridiculous amount of carries. So they feel a little bit good about maybe their health going forward into the NFL. Both those guys should be drafted. And if they decide, they could stay if they want to. They really could go back for another year if they want to, either one of them, and see if they can up their draft stock a little bit. But next year's running back class is going to be a lot deeper, a lot more talented at the top at the very least. So you might not want to wait around in the year. You might want to go now and see if you can get a mid-round selection out of your current status. Redshirt sophomore wide receiver Haselwood, I think his first name is spelled Jadon Haselwood. I'm not sure exactly sure how to say his first name, but he's been one of their better receivers this year. Not blowing anyone out of the water in terms of his statistical production. I think Marvin Mims is by far probably the most talented wide receiver, and Haselwood is about 166 receiving yards right now, so not a lot of production out of him, but he's still a guy who, again, could be drafted because a lot of the wide receiver selections in the draft are more about talent, more about physical traits sometimes than just pure raw production. So someone who has a chance to get drafted nonetheless. Senior guard Marquis Hayes, he's probably the best offensive lineman on that unit right now. A unit that produced several guys in the NFL last year. Hayes has been very good for them. He's someone who should be drafted. I don't know how highly he'll go. Again, predicting guards and interior offensive line where they get drafted is very difficult because there's very low positional value for the interior offensive line as opposed to tackles. So we'll see what happens. But Hayes is a very good player who will get drafted should he declare. Well, he's going to have to. He's a senior. But moving to the defensive side of the ball, Perrion and Winfrey and Nick Bonitto are obviously the best defensive players on that unit right now. Winfrey's probably going to be a third-round selection, I would say. This interior defensive line class is not very good. But Perrion and Winfrey, he's not really separated himself from kind of the middle-round guys so far this year. He's still a very good player, don't get me wrong, but he's not really separated himself in any way this season. So he's going to probably be in that round 3 to 4 conversation, despite the fact that he's a very well-known player. And then Benito, to me, is a round 2 or round 3 kind of guy. I'm sorry, round 2 or round 1 kind of guy, excuse me. I've had him going in the first round a couple of mock drafts I've done just because of his incredible production off the edge. His body type's going to cause some questions because he doesn't have a lot of weight on it. Let's put it that way. Compared to a lot of the guys that are seen as desirable for weighing 250 outside linebacker or weighing 275 for a defensive end, Benito is closer to 240. Which is not terrible, but it's a little bit slighter than you would hope to have for someone who's rushing off the edge, especially if you're going up against an offensive tackle that's 320 pounds or something like that, where you have to face a pulling guard who's 350. It's going to be difficult for Benito to survive that way in the NFL, but we've seen plenty of guys do it in the past. And Benito, again, his raw production as a pass rusher is just insane this year. So, someone I view as a first-round pick. Two linebackers, senior Caleb Kelly and junior Brian Asamoah, two guys who are probably going to be late-round selections. There's a lot of linebackers in college football that are very productive, but just don't get drafted very highly because of physical traits or because of physical limitations. maybe they don't process the game very quickly, but it's very easy to find a lot of productive college linebackers who just end up being special teamers in the NFL. These guys could be in that range. I think they could both be drafted if they go into the draft, but I'm not saying they're going to be stars by any means. Redshirt sophomore cornerback Woodi Washington. Someone I keep an eye on. I'm not really that high on him, honestly. I just did a ranking of the top 30 cornerbacks going into the 2022 NFL draft. I didn't include Washington on there. Could he have made an appearance? Yeah, sure, he probably could have. I won't lie about that. But this year, no interceptions yet. Played in just 2 games. So I'm actually not even sure if he's going to be available health-wise for this game. I probably should check that. I know I've checked some guys out with injuries. I didn't look at Oklahoma's roster in particular, so maybe he will be available, maybe he won't be. But someone overall to keep an eye on for the NFL draft. And senior safety, Delarrin Turner Yell. I believe that's his last name, or full name. Sorry, Delarrin Turner Yell. There we go. Who's been a bit of an underrated player, I think, in terms of just his production as a safety. He had an interception last year. He's got a pick already this year. Someone I would keep an eye on. It's a very deep safety class, so I'm not exactly sure where he'll stack up. Because once you get outside the top, I'd say 12 safeties in this year's group, it's really hard to rank them. I'm going through that process right now, ranking the top 30 safeties for the upcoming draft. And I think I have Turner Yell on there, but I have him very low. It's hard because, again, once you get outside the top 12, it's really hard to figure out where the rest rank compared to Turks. They're all very close together. And again, you're talking about at that point, I mean, for safeties outside the top 12, you're talking about maybe 4th round and lower. So it's very difficult to place all those guys. But Turner Yell is someone I would definitely keep an eye on to see where see if he's able to move up in the draft. And then switching over to Texas, much less to talk about here. Redshirt sophomore wide receiver Jordan Whittington is someone I want to keep an eye on for this game. One of the few guys eligible in the offense, I think it actually has a chance to get drafted. I really don't think there's a lot of guys for this draft class in particular coming out of Texas that have a shot at getting picked anywhere on the board. It just doesn't, it's just not a loaded offense. It really isn't. And part of it's the offense itself. The game plan doesn't really put a ton of guys in positions to be successful, especially at wide receiver. Whittington is a guy who I think could be drafted. He's got a little bit of that running back build for wide receiver. He's 6'1", 206. So it'll be interesting to see. Maybe you can come up with a bunch of different ways to utilize him in the NFL level. The other offensive player I want to talk about is senior right tackle / left guard, because he's played both spots this year and started at both spots this year. Derek Kerstetter. I'm hoping I'm saying that last name right. But yeah, he's been very good for them. He's their best offensive lineman from what I could tell so far this year. Again, he's played right tackle and left guard, which means he's probably going to play guard in the NFL. Usually the guys who play tackle and guard in college football go to guard in the NFL. It's just how it happens most of the time. But maybe he'll play outside. I don't know. I'm not viewing him as a top offensive lineman prospect by any means, but he's certainly someone who should get drafted at some point in the process. Switching over to the defensive side of the ball, Keondre Coburn at nose tackle has not been a highly productive player this year, but again, playing nose tackle is very different than playing like something like defensive tackle in some schemes where you're expected to be both the pass rusher and a run defender. For nose tackles, most of the time you're trying to eat space and create opportunities for other players. So Coburn has not been fantastic this year, but he's already kind of working towards what he had last year in terms of statistical production. Again, not been his best year, probably been one of his worst years the past 3 seasons, but he's got good tape from 2019 and 2020 to try to back himself up there. Moving to linebacker, senior linebacker Demarvion Overshown is the most well-known player on this Texas team in terms of the 2022 NFL draft. The concerns would be, while he has that kind of ideal build, he's kind of a tweener between like a safety build and a linebacker build, which is something that a lot of NFL teams look for nowadays. The concerns have been he's just been bad in pass coverage. He's just been bad in coverage. He's not been doing well in terms of hanging with players in coverage at all. And the concerns will be that, well, if you've got that build, you're expected to be decent in coverage. He's about 6'4", 217, 220, somewhere in that range. If you're built like that, you're expected to be at least passable in coverage. And he has not been that this year. And because he's on the smaller side, he'll get blown off the line of scrimmage in the running game if he ever comes face-to-face with an offensive tackle in the hole. So that's some concerns with him, and that's why I think he's probably falling in a lot of these mock drafts and big awards, because, again, he's not put on good tape this year. And a guy's kind of a linebacker / edge rusher for them, senior Ray Thornton, someone I would keep an eye on, or Ray Thornton's, someone I keep an eye on there. Not going to be a highly rated player, might not even be drafted, but just someone I would watch to see if he's able to get himself on the board and try to rack up as much as possible to try to get his stock up into a draftable position. And last guy I want to talk about is senior safety BJ Foster. So if you notice, a lot of older players here for Texas, a lot of seniors along this defensive side of the ball, and a lot of seniors in this draft class in general. because they are still working and bringing in a lot of those younger recruits and getting them ready to be drafted. So those guys next year, I expect to see a lot more juniors in the 2023 draft class for Texas. But right now, 2022, mostly dominated by seniors and guys like B.J. Foster, who has an interception already this year and a pass defense, along with 21 tackles. But again, it's a very deep safety class, so someone like B.J. Foster might end up going in the late day 3 kind of rounds. But that's it for now. I'm going to be doing videos talking about Georgia versus Auburn, as well as Penn State versus Iowa, and Notre Dame versus Virginia Tech here in a few minutes, so go check those out. I'll include a full list of all prospects that I talked about in this video down in the description. And if you have any questions or concerns for me, go mention them. Go talk to me at Sam_Teets33. That's SAM_TEETS33 on Twitter. Talk to you later.